I never imagined that trusting my parents would cost me the home I worked my whole life for. My name is Holly Grant, and for as long as I can remember, my parents made every decision for me. When I finally bought my own apartment in Brooklyn after years of saving, I thought I had finally built something that truly belonged to me. For a brief moment, I felt what freedom really meant. Then they showed up one weekend with coffee and smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. My father started talking about protecting assets and avoiding unnecessary taxes. My mother nodded, assuring me that transferring the apartment into their name would only be temporary and completely for my own good. It sounded reasonable, even caring, so I didn't question it. I told myself my parents would never hurt me. I signed the papers believing that family always came first. But I didn't know they had already promised my apartment to my sister Elise and her husband. To them, I wasn't the daughter protecting her home, I was just a convenient name on a title deed. A week later, when I discovered the truth, I acted before they could do anything. The first thing I changed was the name on the ownership, and it wasn't theirs. Have you ever trusted someone in your family only to uncover their real motives later? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to know how you dealt with it. That dinner felt ordinary at first. It was a Friday evening in late spring, warm enough that the windows of my apartment were open and the smell of roasted garlic drifted through from the kitchen. My parents had offered to bring dinner, and I thought it was their way of celebrating my first months in my new place. When they arrived, my sister Elise and her husband Craig came with them carrying a bottle of wine and a pie that looked store-bought. Elise worked in event planning before she quit last year, saying she needed a break, while Craig claimed to be between business ventures. They had been living with my parents ever since. We sat around the small table in my living room, the air filled with the hum of casual conversation. For a while, it felt almost peaceful. My father asked about work, and I told him about a new interior project I was designing for a hotel lobby in Manhattan. He nodded politely but seemed distracted. My mother complimented the curtains and asked if I had used the family discount she used to get from a friend at a fabric store. Craig laughed and said, "You see, your parents always think long-term." Then smoothly, he shifted the topic. "Speaking of long-term, have you thought about protecting your property? You know, taxes, legal issues, those things can sneak up on you." His tone was casual, but his eyes were sharp. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Before I could answer, my father leaned forward. "Craig's right. You're new to ownership. It's easy to overlook certain risks. We've been thinking maybe you should transfer the apartment temporarily to us, just for safety." My mother added, "It would help you in case anything unexpected happens. Think of it as a shield, not a takeover." Elise stayed silent, swirling her wine, her lips curved in a faint smile that didn't match the conversation. Something about that look made me uneasy. "I'm not sure that's necessary," I said quietly, trying to sound polite. "Everything's fine. I pay my taxes. I have insurance." My father shook his head, smiling like I was a child refusing good advice. "Sweetheart, you've worked too hard to lose it all to one mistake. Sometimes a little legal adjustment can save you years of trouble." Craig nodded, raising his glass. "Exactly. It's all about planning ahead. Families should help each other, right?" The room suddenly felt smaller. My mother reached across the table and touched my hand. "We're only trying to protect you, Holly. Don't you trust us?" The question hit harder than I expected. I looked from her gentle expression to my father's steady gaze, then to Elise's unreadable face. For a moment, it felt like every eye at the table was waiting for me to agree. My mouth went dry. I tried to find a reason to refuse, but my thoughts tangled in the weight of their expectations. Craig's eyes lingered on me with a calm, detached curiosity, as if he already knew how this would end. "Just think about it," my father said. "We'll handle the paperwork, no rush." The rest of the meal passed in silence, broken only by clinking glasses and the sound of forks scraping plates. When they left later that night, Elise gave me a quick hug and whispered, "You're lucky to have parents who care so much." I nodded, forcing a smile I didn't feel. After the door closed, I sat at the table staring at the empty wine glass still marked with Craig's fingerprints. The city noise outside seemed louder than before. Something about that dinner had changed the air around me. I didn't know how, but I sensed that night was only the beginning of something I wouldn't be able to undo. 3 weeks later, I sat in a lawyer's office with my pen trembling over the signature line. The blinds were half closed, letting in strips of light that fell across the polished desk. My parents sat across from me, both smiling as if everything about this morning was routine. My father had said he knew a trusted lawyer who handled family transfers all the time, so there was nothing to worry about. The man, whose name was Mr. Green, greeted me warmly, but looked mostly at my parents while speaking. The papers were already laid out, each page marked with sticky notes where I was supposed to sign. He explained that this was just a temporary transfer, a common method to avoid tax complications and ensure asset safety. His voice was smooth, confident, rehearsed. I nodded, pretending to understand, though my stomach felt heavy. My mother leaned forward, her voice soft but persuasive. "It's only on paper, Holly. Nothing changes. You still live here. Make your payments, everything stays the same." Her words sounded kind, almost soothing, yet I noticed how her eyes flickered toward my father, seeking silent approval. He placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "We're just helping you manage it properly. One day, you'll thank us." The air in that office felt thick. My hand itched to hold the pen, but something inside me resisted. I asked if I could review the documents before signing, and my father laughed gently, saying, "Of course, but it's all standard stuff. We've already gone through it." I skimmed the pages anyway, though most of the legal terms blurred together. Every clause looked harmless, every phrase crafted to sound protective. Still, an unease pressed against my chest, a voice whispering that something wasn't right. When Mr. Green left the room to make a phone call, I took my phone from my purse and texted Lacey, my closest friend since college. "They want me to sign ownership papers. It's supposed to be temporary. Is that normal?" Her reply came almost instantly. "Be careful. Add a clause that lets you revoke the transfer if they misuse it. Trust me." I stared at the screen, reading her message twice. It felt strange to think I needed protection from my own family, but my gut told me she was right. When Mr. Green returned, I smiled politely and asked if I could add one more line. "I just want to make sure there's a clause allowing me to revoke this transfer if the property is used for purposes other than agreed upon within 60 days. He raised an eyebrow, surprised but not alarmed. "That's unusual, but not illegal. If it gives you peace of mind, we can note it." My parents exchanged quick glances. My mother's smile tightened, but she said nothing. My father chuckled, masking irritation. "You see, she gets that from me. Always careful." Mr. Green wrote the sentence in the final paragraph, his handwriting small and neat. I read it again, memorizing every word. When he handed me the pen, I hesitated. My hand trembled slightly as I signed the first page, then the next, each stroke heavier than the last. My father tapped the table, murmuring approval while my mother busied herself arranging her purse. When it was done, Mr. Green stamped the last page, the sound echoing softly across the room like the closing of a door. As they stood to leave, my mother hugged me and whispered, "Now it's official. Everything will be easier from here." Her perfume lingered after she pulled away, sweet but cloying. My father shook Mr. Green's hand and said, "We appreciate your help. She's in good hands." I smiled faintly, thanking them all, but my mind was elsewhere. Outside, the city noise greeted me like a rush of air after being underwater. My parents walked ahead, chatting cheerfully about lunch plans while I trailed behind, clutching my copy of the documents. The folder felt heavier than it should have. I opened it on the subway, staring at my own signature printed again and again, each one binding me tighter to something I didn't fully understand. That night, I couldn't sleep. I placed the folder on my desk and read the papers again. My name appeared at the bottom of every page beside the clause Lacey had told me to include. It was small, almost invisible, among the dense paragraphs, but it was there, a single line of control I hadn't surrendered. I didn't know then how much that one sentence would matter, or how it would become the thread that unraveled everything that followed. 2 months later, my parents threw a family gathering. It was meant to celebrate their 30th wedding anniversary, and for once, I wanted to believe it would be a simple evening filled with laughter, food, and nostalgia. Their house in Queens looked beautiful, decorated with gold balloons, candles, and framed photos from decades of memories. My mother had gone all out with the catering while my father made sure everyone had a drink in hand. Relatives filled the room, chatting loudly, and the air carried that mixture of comfort and tension that always came with family events. I arrived early, helped arrange flowers, and smiled when my mother fussed over the centerpiece, adjusting it for the third time. She seemed genuinely happy, or maybe that was just part of the performance. My father greeted guests near the door, his voice booming with charm, and I could almost forget the unease that had been following me for weeks. Then Elise and Craig arrived. They were late as usual, walking in together like celebrities making an entrance. Elise wore a fitted ivory dress, her hair perfectly styled, and Craig had that smug confidence that always made me uneasy. He carried a small wrapped box and kissed my mother on the cheek as if he owned the room. Conversations paused briefly before resuming, but the air shifted. My mother's smile brightened as she ushered them in, and my father clapped Craig on the shoulder like a proud mentor. Dinner began with toasts and polite conversation. People reminisced about how my parents met, about their first apartment, about how their love had endured through thick and thin. I sat quietly, raising my glass when appropriate, forcing a smile as I listened. Elise dominated the conversation with stories about life changes and upcoming plans, though she never explained what those plans were. My mother looked at her with glowing pride while my father laughed at every joke Craig made, no matter how flat. The longer it went on, the more I felt like an outsider in a celebration I was supposed to belong to. When dessert was served, my father stood clearing his throat. 30 years, he began, his voice steady and commanding. Not everyone makes it this far, and I thank every one of you for being here to celebrate this milestone with us. A round of applause followed, and he smiled, basking in it. Then he continued, "Family is everything. Patty and I have always believed that what we build should stay within the family." I thought it was a sentimental statement, one of those lines parents use to close a speech. But then his tone changed slightly. "Which is why we've made a decision about the future. We've decided to give Holly's apartment to Elise and Craig." The room fell silent for a heartbeat before a few people began clapping awkwardly. My breath caught in my throat. I looked at him, waiting for some clarification, some hint that this was a misunderstanding. But my father's smile was steady, and my mother's eyes glistened with satisfaction. Elise gasped theatrically and put a hand to her chest, pretending to be surprised. Craig leaned back in his chair, his grin confident, his hand covering hers like the gesture of a man who had just won a prize. I felt every muscle in my body tighten. "What did you say?" I asked quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. My father turned toward me with the same calm tone he used when explaining something to a child. "It's only fair, Holly. They're starting a family, and your apartment is sitting under our name now. We thought it would be the perfect gift." I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. "Gift." I repeated the word, scraping my throat. "You're giving them my home." My mother touched my arm, her tone gentle but firm. "Sweetheart, it's not personal. It's just a way to balance things. Elise has been through a lot, and she deserves a little help." The laughter and chatter from earlier had vanished. Everyone watched, pretending not to stare, but unable to look away. My father raised his glass again, cutting through the silence. To family, to love, to new beginnings. Glasses clinked around the table, but the sound felt hollow. I stared at the wine in front of me, unable to move. My chest tightened, a painful, suffocating pressure that no breath could ease. I saw Elise glance at me briefly, then turn to Craig, her smile wide and triumphant. Their fingers intertwined across the table, her diamond ring catching the light like a cruel symbol. I wanted to speak, to shout, to demand how they could do this, but my voice felt trapped beneath the weight of disbelief. My father's eyes met mine, and for a second I saw nothing resembling regret, only certainty. I realized then that everything I had feared was true. They had planned this. Every word, every gesture of reassurance had been a carefully placed stone in the trap I had willingly walked into. After dinner, people lingered with polite small talk, avoiding my gaze. My mother hugged guests at the door, her laughter ringing through the hall. Elise and Craig stood near the piano receiving congratulations, as if this had been their night all along. My father moved from one guest to another, thanking them for celebrating the family's milestone. No one mentioned my name. When the last guests left, I walked out quietly. The night air was cold, and the sky was a deep, indifferent gray. I stood on the sidewalk staring at the house glowing warmly behind me. Inside those walls, my family celebrated what they called love, while I tried to understand how betrayal could wear such a familiar face. That night, I realized I was never the daughter they wanted, just the one with assets they could use. I didn't sleep for days after that dinner. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still see their faces, my father's pride, my mother's soft satisfaction, and Elise's triumphant smile. The words gift and family replayed in my mind like a cruel echo. I felt trapped between disbelief and fury, but somewhere inside me something sharp began to wake. On the third night, I pulled the folder of documents from my desk drawer. I read through every page carefully, my hands trembling slightly as I turned each one. And then, there it was, the small paragraph I had added months ago, almost invisible at the bottom of page 6. Transfer of ownership may be revoked within 60 days, should the property be used for any purpose outside of the originally stated intent. My breath caught. The clause was still valid, untouched, and fully enforceable. The next morning, I took the subway to Midtown and walked into a small law office I found online. The sign on the frosted glass read, "Neal and Associates." The man who greeted me was in his late 40s with calm eyes and an honest tone that immediately set me at ease. I handed him the documents and explained everything. He read in silence for a long time, tracing each page with his finger before finally looking up. "You did something very smart," he said. "This clause gives you full authority to reverse the transfer. They cannot legally gift the property to anyone else." I exhaled slowly, the first real breath I had taken in days. "So I can stop them." He nodded. "You can do more than that. You can reclaim it entirely." For the first time, I felt a spark of power return to me. My voice steadied as I asked what needed to be done. Neal outlined a simple process: a notarized statement invoking the revocation clause, a certified filing with the county clerk, and immediate legal notice to the parties involved. It sounded straightforward, almost mechanical, but to me, it felt monumental. By noon, we had everything prepared. I signed the statement, my pen no longer shaking. Neal filed it himself, sending me a confirmation email before the end of the day. That night, as I sat alone at my kitchen table, I thought about what to do next. The apartment still held everything I had worked for, but it no longer felt like home. Every corner reminded me of manipulation disguised as care. Selling it felt right, not out of spite, but for closure. When I told Neal my plan, he didn't hesitate. "If you want it done quietly, I can find a buyer immediately. The market's hot right now." Within 48 hours, he introduced me to a young couple, Daniel and Mia, who had just moved to New York. They stood in my living room with wide eyes, marveling at the sunlight pouring through the windows, asking questions about the neighborhood schools and the best coffee nearby. Their excitement was genuine, and it softened something inside me. Watching them, I realized they saw in this place what I once did: a beginning. The sale was finalized faster than I expected. Neal managed every detail discreetly, ensuring there would be no public record accessible to my parents before it was too late. Meanwhile, Elise and my parents were blissfully unaware. They likely assumed the transfer had already gone through, that the apartment was theirs to claim whenever they pleased. My father probably boasted about it to friends, calling it family property. I imagined their faces when they would later learn that ownership had changed again, this time legally and irrevocably. But I didn't crave revenge. I only wanted distance. The morning after the sale closed, I packed the last of my things. Boxes lined the walls, each one carefully labeled. I took one final walk through the rooms, the kitchen where I had spent quiet mornings with coffee, the living room where sunlight had once felt like hope, and the small balcony where I had stood watching the city breathe. Everything looked the same yet. It no longer belonged to me in spirit. It belonged to Daniel and Mia now, and that felt right. As I locked the door for the last time, I paused. The hallway was silent except for the faint hum of the elevator at the end. I slid the keys into an envelope and left them on the counter for Neil to deliver. Standing there, I realized how strange freedom could feel, both light and heavy. I didn't feel victorious, only free from the illusion that family always means safety. When I stepped outside the city, air hit my face cool and sharp. I walked away without looking back for several blocks before turning once more. The building stood quietly against the sky, familiar yet distant, as if it had already forgotten me. And maybe that was the closure I needed. A week later, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. It started early in the morning, just as I was leaving for work. The screen lit up with Elise's name again and again, followed by messages in all caps. "What did you do? Why are there strangers in my house? You're going to pay for this." I let the calls go to voicemail, but curiosity finally made me listen to one. Her voice was furious, almost trembling. "We showed up to move in, and some couple named Daniel and Mia are living there. They said they bought it. Tell me this isn't real." I sat at my desk, calm in a way I hadn't been in months. I typed a short reply. "Everything is legal. Please contact your attorney before making accusations." Within minutes, Craig began calling from his number. His messages were worse. "We'll sue you. You can't just steal property. Your parents will make sure you lose everything." I didn't answer. Instead, I forwarded a copy of the official contract and the signed revocation document to his email, along with a simple note: "Ownership was lawfully transferred weeks ago. Please refrain from harassment." By noon, my office line began buzzing. It was the receptionist, her voice uncertain. "There are 2 people here asking for you. They say they're your parents." I froze for a second, then told her to send them to the lobby. Gordon and Patty stood there, faces red with anger. My mother's tone cracked the moment she spoke. "How could you do this to your own family, after everything we've done for you?" My father stepped forward, his voice low but sharp. "You embarrassed us. You made us look like fools in front of everyone. That apartment was supposed to help your sister, not strangers." I kept my voice even. "It was my home, and I had every right to sell it. You gave it away without my consent. I simply made sure the law worked the way it was supposed to." My father's jaw tightened, and my mother's eyes filled with tears that looked more theatrical than genuine. "You've turned your back on your family," she said. "You'll regret this." I stepped back and gestured toward the exit. "Please leave. This is my workplace." Instead of leaving, they raised their voices. My mother began shouting about betrayal, and my father slammed his hand against the counter. The noise drew attention from my coworkers, who gathered nearby, unsure of what to do. Then, as if on cue, Elise and Craig appeared through the front doors. Elise's face was flushed with rage, her voice slicing through the air. "You ruined everything. That apartment was ours." Craig followed, yelling about lawyers and fraud, waving his phone like a weapon. My manager, Mr. Peterson, rushed out from his office. He tried to calm them, but the shouting only got louder. My mother's sobs turned into dramatic wails, and Elise started pounding on my office door after I retreated inside. Through the glass, I could see people staring, whispering, recording. Craig's voice carried through the hallway, full of venom. "You think you're so smart, Holly. You'll pay for this humiliation." I called the building security and asked them to intervene, but before they could, the situation spiraled further. My father tried to push past the receptionist's desk, and Craig knocked over a stack of brochures in his fury. It was chaos. When the police arrived 15 minutes later, the lobby was filled with tension and silence. One officer stepped forward asking for names. I stayed inside my office, hands steady, watching through the window as they were escorted out. Outside, I could hear Elise shouting that she had proof that the apartment was rightfully hers. The officer's voice was calm but firm. "You need to leave. This is a place of business and you are causing a public disturbance." They resisted at first, but the officers stood their ground. Eventually, the group walked out, still yelling, still refusing to accept what had happened. When it was over, I sat down, the hum of the office returning slowly. My coworkers avoided my eyes, pretending to work. Mr. Peterson came by and closed my office door softly. "Take the rest of the day off," he said. I nodded, grateful. As I packed my bag, I felt something unexpected: peace. For the first time, the noise around me no longer held power. I had taken back control, not through anger, but through quiet resolve. That evening, as I walked home, the city lights felt different, brighter somehow. I knew there would be fallout, more calls, more drama. But the chaos no longer frightened me. I had already survived the worst of it the moment I realized my family's love had conditions. Everything after that was just consequence. The next morning, the video from my office lobby went viral. Someone from the building had recorded the entire scene: my parents shouting, Elise pounding on my office door, and Craig arguing with the police. It spread across social media platforms in a matter of hours, shared under captions like "Family Meltdown in Manhattan" and "When Nepotism Explodes." By noon, it was on local news segments, and by evening, it had reached national attention. The comments ranged from disbelief to ridicule. Strangers dissected every frame, speculating about what could drive a family to such chaos in public. I watched the clip once, sitting alone on my couch, and then turned off my phone. By the end of that week, consequences had already begun. Craig's firm released a public statement declaring that his behavior did not align with company values. Within a day, his profile disappeared from their website. I heard through mutual acquaintances that his termination was effective immediately. Apparently, clients had seen the video and several threatened to withdraw their accounts if he remained employed. Craig tried to issue an apology online, blaming stress and family misunderstandings, but the internet was merciless. Every attempt to defend himself only drew more mockery. His arrogance, once his weapon, became his downfall. Elise took it even harder. The same pride that had once made her untouchable now shattered under the weight of public humiliation. Neighbors whispered behind her back, colleagues avoided her, and old friends stopped returning calls. For years, she had built her identity around appearances, projecting perfection through curated photos and confident smiles. Now every trace of that illusion crumbled. Rumors spread that she and Craig fought constantly after the scandal. One evening, I received a notification from the court registry she had filed for divorce. I did not celebrate. There was no satisfaction in watching someone unravel, even someone who had hurt me. But I did feel a quiet closure, the kind that comes from knowing the truth had finally done its work. My parents faced their own storm. Gordon and Patty had lived their lives caring deeply about reputation. For them, respectability was currency. But once the video circulated, their polite suburban world turned its back. The neighbors who used to wave from driveways now crossed the street. Friends who once attended their dinner parties stopped answering messages. Even the local church where my mother volunteered politely suggested she take some time away. My father, always proud of his standing, found himself avoided at the golf club. I learned all this from an old family friend who called to check on me. There was no joy in hearing it, only a distant sadness. They had built their world on image, and it had collapsed under their own actions. Meanwhile, I stayed silent through it all. I refused interviews, ignored messages from reporters, and declined invitations from gossip outlets wanting to share my side. Neil, ever the calm professional, handled everything with precision. He filed a restraining order on my behalf, ensuring none of them could contact or approach me again. When the order was approved, he called to tell me, "This is closure, Holly," he said gently. Not vengeance. Just protection. I thanked him, though. Words felt too small for the relief that washed over me. For the first time in my life, I had boundaries that could not be crossed. In the weeks that followed, life grew quieter. I changed my number, moved to a new apartment, and started walking home from work instead of taking the subway. The city that once felt harsh now seemed strangely kind. I learned the small rhythm of solitude, the hum of traffic at night, the comfort of silence, the slow return of my own voice. My colleagues still whispered, sometimes curious about the drama, but they respected my distance. I poured myself into work, into rebuilding a version of life that was mine alone. One afternoon, as I left the office, I passed a coffee shop window and caught my reflection. I looked different not because of clothes or hair, but because peace had settled where anxiety used to live. My phone buzzed in my pocket with another missed call from an unknown number, probably a reporter or someone chasing a headline. I silenced it without hesitation and kept walking. Later that night, I received an email from Neil with the final confirmation the restraining order was permanent. He ended the message with a single sentence that stayed with me long after I closed the laptop. Sometimes the only way to heal is to stop explaining. I sat by the window looking out at the city lights flickering against the dark sky. For years I had believed that peace came from forgiveness, from understanding why people hurt you and learning to let go. But now, as I watched the quiet streets below, I understood something deeper. Peace was not about forgetting, or even forgiving. It was about creating space where pain could no longer reach you. Sometimes peace isn't forgiveness, it's boundaries. Months later, Brooklyn finally felt quiet again. The chaos that had once shadowed every step of my life had faded into memory. I found a new apartment on the edge of Carroll Gardens, small but filled with light, where mornings began with coffee on a windowsill and ended with books scattered across the couch. There were no raised voices, no constant tension vibrating in the air. Just silence. And for the first time, I realized how rare and precious that could be. My new job gave me a rhythm I hadn't felt in years. The office was calm, my colleagues kind, and I began focusing on things that had nothing to do with survival. I started painting again, something I had abandoned after college, and I enrolled in a weekend writing class just because it made me happy. Life felt smaller, but in a way that was freeing rather than limiting. I didn't owe anyone explanations anymore, and that kind of peace was unfamiliar but deeply grounding. One afternoon, Lacey came to visit. She was one of the few friends who had stayed through everything. She looked around my new place, her smile soft but proud. "You did the right thing," she said simply. For a moment, I didn't answer. I watched the sunlight spread across the floor and thought about everything that phrase meant. Doing the right thing had cost me a family, or at least the illusion of one, but it had also given me myself back. That night, as I sat by the window, I finally understood what had taken me so long to learn. Family isn't defined by shared blood or endless sacrifice. It's defined by respect, choice, and the willingness to see each other as whole people, not possessions. I didn't lose a family, I lost the illusion of one. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. If you've ever faced a choice between family loyalty and self-respect, share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might remind someone that they're not alone. Standing up for yourself isn't coldness, it's courage. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more true stories about finding peace, strength, and clarity after heartbreak.